Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Once again, today we are going to talk about the case of P. Diddy or Sean Combs. Up there, on the one that's on screen, you can see the rest of my cases. Here are my social media profiles if you'd like to connect with me. And without anything else to say, let's get started. Sean John Combs was born on November 4th, 1969 in Harlem, the well-known neighborhood of New York. Although he didn't live there for long, as his parents, Janice Smalls and Melvin Earl Combs, decided to move to Mount Vernon, another city in the same state. His mother, Janice, was a beautiful woman who occasionally worked as a model, although her main job was as a teacher's assistant at a school. Melvin, on the other hand, worked in the United States Air Force. Although in reality, his main source of income was thanks to his work with Frank Lucas, a well-known drug dealer from New York State. This clearly criminal job was the reason why, at 33 years old, Melvin was murdered. He was shot while sitting in his car, parked on the east side of Central Park. At the time of his death, Sean was 2 years old and the couple's second daughter had just been born. Thus, Janice became a single mother of 2 children. The lifestyle they had led until then was impossible to maintain with just Janice's job. In fact, it can be said that her children grew up in poverty, although she always made sure to meet their needs and fill them with love. However, everything they had experienced left its mark on Sean. Evidence of this was his irascible character. He was very easy to anger, and as a result of this, he was nicknamed Puff, coming from the English phrase huff and puff, which in Spanish could be translated as huffing and puffing. To breathe heavily after a confrontation or when one is angry. Instead of being upset by that nickname, Sean completely embraced it. And by the time he got to Howard University to study business, everyone already knew him as Puff, Sean, or Puff. No, he finished college. After 2 years of studying, he dropped out to fully dedicate himself to work, but during that time, he made a name for himself. Everyone was talking about the campus parties he organized. The parties were of such magnitude that they received hundreds of guests. Who didn't want to miss the performance of popular artists of the time, like Heavy D, Teddy Riley, and other trendy singers? This ability to create massive events caught the attention of Andre Harrell, the founder of Uptown Records, who decided to offer him an internship at his company in 1990. He believed that Sean had what it took to manage the careers of his artists, and he proved that he did. The 20-year-old man had an undeniable talent for music production, but not only for that, but also for everything that came after. Every part of the work of making an album and building artists, he could do it. He had an eye for these things, which led him to grow quickly. By the following year, Puff was already working full-time for Uptown Records, and he had definitely dropped out of college, dedicating himself to managing the careers of artists like Mary J. Blige and Jodeci. Among the different events that Sean Combs organized to promote his clients, in 1991, he hosted a basketball game and a concert featuring his stars for charity at a New York University gymnasium. The event, held on December 28th of that year, was attended by an estimated 5,000 people, when the maximum capacity of the venue was 2,730. At one point in the night, the number of people resulted in an accident which was due to poor organization, whether it was Diddy's fault, the company's, or the venue's. But ultimately a mistake that could have been avoided. And that ended up taking the lives of 9 people and causing at least 29 others to be injured in a stampede. In the face of such tragedy, the New York City Mayor's office declared that Sean Combs had hired inexperienced security guards who had allowed twice the permitted number of people into the venue. In response to these accusations, Diddy and his lawyers maintained that he had not hired the event's security. According to him, this incident left him with scars. He saw the bodies of the deceased people, tried to revive them, while other people said that he didn't seem to emit a single shred of guilt about it, and that he didn't seem concerned about the people. For this incident, the authorities did not press any criminal charges against him, but the families of the victims sued the city authorities and the event organizers. The case was closed with a compensation for the families of the deceased of $3 million, of which Diddy had to pay a total of $750,000. Despite this accident, Sean's career did not stop. While he continued working at Uptown Records, he signed a contract with a budding rapper. He called himself Biggie Smalls, but he would become known worldwide as Notorious Big. Together, they produced the rapper's first album, Ready to Die, which was a tremendous success. And it served as a catalyst for Sean Combs to leave Uptown Records and open his own record label, which he called Bad Boy Entertainment, taking with him the artists he had previously managed. Throughout the rest of the 90s, the firm became one of the most successful and relevant in terms of urban genres. But the success of the record label did not prevent tragic things from continuing to happen around Diddy, or because of him. In March of 1997, the rapper who had brought him success as a producer, Notorious Big, was murdered at the age of 24. Back in the 70s, a new type of music began to develop in New York, not very accepted, but that revolutionized the lives of many people. This style, which they called hip-hop, spread to different regions, changing a bit depending on where it was played. Over the years and the advancement of this movement, New York began to be known as the East Coast and California as the West Coast, in what we could call a cultural battle in which the East Coast claimed to be the first to do hip-hop, wanting to be, moreover, the only ones. However, by the 90s, the cultural battle became a gang war. Among the famous Western rappers are Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, the band Niggas with Attitudes, NWA, and Cypress Hill, to name a few. Among the Eastern rappers, we can see 50 Cent, Jay-Z, the Notorious, Big or Biggie, among others. On the West Coast, the record label Death Row Records reigned, and on the East was Bad Boy Entertainment. The producer Suge Knight was the owner of Death Row Records in the 90s. He was also known for his mafia-like methods and for attempting to scam Snoop Dogg, who signed with him early in his career. On the other side, at Bad Boy Entertainment, were Biggie and Puff Daddy, as the famous rapper called them. Tupac was part of Suge Knight's label on the West Coast, on the other side of Puff Daddy. Really? I'm trying to make this understood in the most orderly way possible. The issue of coasts is very important, because they started to fight depending on which coast you were from. And the story that many of us know precisely starts with something that was not so normal. And it's that Biggie and Tupac met and became friends, not very close friends though. Some say they didn't treat each other that well, but it's assumed that they met and hit it off right away. Biggie and Tupac were from opposite coasts. By then, Biggie had made his first album, which was a success, and Tupac had already been established for a while. The 30th of November, 1994. Tupac was going to record a song with another artist at Qua Studios, a friend of Biggie Smalls. Tupac knew that Biggie and Puff Daddy were in another part of the building, so he went in without any problems, and once inside, he ran into a group of men who shot him 5 times. In response, Tupac fell to the floor and, still conscious, played dead while they robbed him of the things he had on him. Once the attackers had left, he gathered his strength and got into the elevator in front of him. Upon going up, he immediately ran into Biggie and Puff Daddy, who looked at him in a way that shocked him. He was expecting a reaction from worried people, and instead he found an attitude of surprise that he was still alive. We have no way of knowing if it was paranoia or if that was really happening. But Tupac felt that they knew about the attack, that it was something well planned. Moreover, if we put ourselves in the situation, they should have been alarmed for their own lives. If they didn't know who attacked Tupac, why weren't they looking for shelter? They had no way of knowing that the attackers had left. What if they were the target? That's why the reaction of the two seems strange to them. Sometime later, Tupac went to jail on an abuse charge. And there he was visited by Suge Knight, who was looking for him to join his record label. Clearly also taking advantage of the friction he was having with Biggie and Puff Daddy. Chaos broke out at the Source Awards on August 3, 1995. The award took place in New York, Puff Daddy's turf. Jock Knight, with the mobster attitude that characterized him at that time, got on stage and gave a speech clearly against Bad Boy Records. Any
artist out there who wants to be an artist and stay a star and doesn't want to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, coming down front.
Puff Daddy appeared in all the productions he was in. If you didn't recognize him in the music, you are going to face him. Because in all the videos, he showed up somewhere Shock Knight that wanted to stay with Snoop Dogg and Tupac. He confronted him saying that if they didn't want the producer breathing down their neck, could they sign with his record label? Of course, he knew what he was doing. This suggested Diddy would appear in your music videos and also implied that he was used as a producer to insert himself wherever he could. So, not only to charge for creating music, but also for participating in the vocals, in the videos, in the art, in anything. He wanted to put himself in all available places to be able to make more money over the years and from the artists. Obviously, he knew how to make music that sounded good, so it was a very good option to have him as a producer. For singers who were just starting out, Shock Knight offered itself as a label with different practices, although he wasn't exactly calm, so to speak. Snoop Dogg also took the stage on that occasion, but to calm the situation down a bit. Cause let's remember they were in New York, and the word was already going around that Biggie or Puff Daddy had wanted to kill Tupac, so they had to leave calmly. Jock Knight put up the bail money so that Tupac could get out of jail on the condition that he signed with him to record his next albums. In September of 1995, Jock Knight and Puff Daddy met in a nightclub where a fight broke out. Remember that both were always quite gangster, and at that time they were related to two opposing gangs. That night, a friend of Suge Knight was killed, and since then, other incidents have arisen in which Suge Knight seems to be looking for Diddy, perhaps for revenge. As is common in this music genre, lyrics and music videos reflected conflicts. Specifically in America's Most Wanted, the video of Tupac with Snoop Dogg, in which they very clearly mock P. Diddy and Biggie. Literally, they hired actors who looked just like them to represent them, giving them very similar names. Many things like this went unnoticed or were taken as something much less dangerous than it was. Sometimes the situations they sing about are made up. They are assumptions or stories from friends. But over the years, in every song where P. Diddy was ever mentioned, it was always with the same reputation, that of an abuser. In his song Hit 'Em Up, Tupac basically did the same thing, but even more directly, telling the story of the assassination attempt. Again, adding several threats towards Biggie and Diddy. In addition to saying that everyone who worked at Bad Boy Entertainment could go to hell. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac and Chuck Knight attended Mike Tyson's fight in Las Vegas. On the way out, they ran into Orlando Tyve Anderson, with whom they had a fight that was recorded on the venue's cameras. What Orlando says about this specific moment is that that night, and only that night, they were told not to carry weapons, to leave them at the hotel. A little later, after the altercation, Tupac was murdered in his car where Suge Knight was also. 6 months later, they did the same thing to Biggie. He was in a car, stopped at the traffic light, and they shot him. The curious thing is that Biggie was in another vehicle that night. To this day, it is not really known who ordered them to be killed, and the problem is not who executed the plan, but the mind behind it. It is said that the first to attack was Diddy, that he ordered Tupac to be killed, and as a result, Suge Knight killed Notorious Big. Although at the same time, Diddy is accused of killing both. It's a matter of who you ask. However, there are many lyrics from other rappers that talk about the subject. And when Diddy is mentioned, is it to accuse him of ordering the killing of Tupac or others? Reportedly, Biggie intended to cease collaborating with Sean Combs based on the information presented thus far and what will be discussed later, and perhaps also to his way of behaving in private. So, before losing one of his biggest stars, Diddy decided to kill him, and in this way, keep everything without losing his fame as a producer. Diddy, who was a great friend of Biggie, expressed his pain in the song I'll Be Missing You, which was part of his first album, No Way Out. Diddy's career continued to grow even after accusations that he was involved with the murders, even with his mafia practices. And even when he kept too large a percentage of the distribution rights of the songs he produced. Obviously, Diddy made sure that Biggie's post-mortem album came out quickly. It was the last work left from the rapper. It was released 2 weeks after his death. It was #1 on the charts, and to top it off, it was called Life After Death. It is known that Biggie Smalls's songs, as well as his overall image, were a bit tragic. That is, he narrated his life in a very real way, with everything he had to go through. The title, talking about death, may not be too catchy. What's surprising is that Justo was the album that came out after he died, although it's also obvious that it's a continuation of his first album, which was translated as Ready to Die. And if we're going to be honest, Diddy didn't seem to mourn this death. He had entirely focused on building up Bad Boy Entertainment and his own image, more than remembering his friend. This is not a conspiracy or something that I'm claiming without having known him personally. But many rappers at that time had this same feeling and express it to this day. At that time, Sean Combs continued to seek to establish himself in the industry, producing his own album, as up to that point he had only participated in other people's music. But none of Diddy's songs were radio material, none were a resounding and indisputable success, as had been the productions he had previously made for other artists. 2 years later, in May of 1999, Diddy had his first brush with the law. He was officially accused of having harassed and attacked the director of Interscope Records, Steve Stout, with whom he had had a discussion about a music video. At the formal hearing, Diddy pleaded guilty and was sentenced to take a one-day class on anger management and control. That same year, he ran into trouble with the police again, when a few months later, he and his then-girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, were arrested. The man had been involved in a fight at a bowling alley. When the police searched his car, they found a 9mm gun under his seat. He had no permit for that gun, and that was what led to him and Jennifer Lopez being arrested. Although the singer was acquitted, and the charges against Diddy ended up having no consequences. In fact, the most important part of this side of the story is the former rapper Shine or Jamal Barrow, who is now 46 years old. At that time, he was one of the people who worked closely with P. Diddy. How did Diddy, acquitted of what happened that night, end up putting the blame on Shine? How do we know? Because the witnesses pointed to Diddy. He had a gun in his hand, he was at the scene, and he had fired. Shine was the new prodigy of Bad Boy Entertainment, the future Biggie Smalls, a person who ultimately had a lot of potential. That night there was a fight. Someone wanted to shoot Shine, and as a result he, Diddy, and the bodyguard pulled out guns to defend themselves. This was not strange or new, at least in the scene. Something similar had already happened to Snoop Dogg. In fact, he faced a lawsuit because his bodyguard killed someone defending him around the same time. The thing is, there were several shots that night. Shine would have fired 3 times, consequently injuring some people inside the club. Diddy got a different lawyer for him and his bodyguard, as he knew perfectly well what he was doing. And meanwhile, Shine tried to prove his innocence. He claimed and still claims that he didn't shoot anyone, that he didn't hurt people. In addition, the shots were not of the caliber that Shine's weapon had. Despite there being evidence and testimonies accusing Diddy of having hurt others that night, the one who served a sentence was Shine. He maintains that this destroyed his life, although today he is not in prison and has built another path. He also claims that what is happening to Diddy today corresponds to everything he has to pay for the amount of destruction he caused. As if that wasn't enough, in 2003, the president of Bad Boy Entertainment sued Diddy for threatening him with a wooden bat. In response to these accusations, the rapper and producer said that his colleague was simply fantasizing and that this had never happened. The case didn't have much impact in court because, magically, the plaintiff decided not to continue showing up to the hearings, and due to lack of evidence, in 2006, the court closed the case. Despite all these incidents, Diddy's career continued to grow until he became one of the biggest names in the music industry. Both as a producer and rapper, Sean Combs was synonymous with success, boosting the careers of singers like Usher, and years later contributing his bit to the careers of superstars like Justin Bieber, Britney Spears, The Weeknd, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. However, the controversies around him never stopped. Over the following years, he was accused by several people of abuse, violence, and more, but these did not have a major impact until November 2023, when Cassandra Ventura, his last partner, reported him. Cassandra Elizabeth Ventura released her song Me and You in 2005, which was very successful, especially in Germany. It turns out that Sean Combs heard the song and Ryan Leslie, her producer, convinced Diddy to participate, making Cassie a partner of Bad Boy Entertainment as she was working to make an album. This was the beginning of one of the worst stages in Cassandra Ventura's life. She had to make 10 albums with Puff Daddy's signature. By 2008, Cassie and P. Diddy were already in a relationship, but it wasn't until 2012 that they confirmed the rumors. By that time, there were already several artists wanting to distance themselves as much as possible from this man, among them singers who wrote lyrics dedicated to the individual. However, to the public eye, Diddy was a very successful producer who maintained a perfect relationship. From the beginning of the relationship, Diddy established a power dynamic between them which was extremely toxic and violent. Sean drugged the girl without her consent and forced her to have encounters with sex workers that he himself chose. In these types of encounters, Sean was always present to record them. But that was not the only thing. He also forced him to be part of the freak-off parties, very exclusive parties organized by him, which we will talk about later in more detail. But as a summary, they were parties that lasted days based on drugs and where all kinds of abuse were allowed. During the relationship, Cassie was a constant victim of abuse at the hands of the producer and rapper, who in addition to subjecting her to psychological violence, also physically and sexually abused her. Like when, in 2018, he abused her when she tried to leave him, despite the hell Cassie was living through. This was not known until November 16, 2023, when, after years of suffering, she decided to sue Diddy. The singer's legal team had not only over 100 pages of her testimony, but also dozens of pieces of evidence of the abuse she had endured. The case was settled out of court. According to statements from Cassie's own lawyers, it was because Sean Combs offered the singer an 8-figure sum as compensation, just so that the matter would not become public, even though he claimed to be innocent, even though the Cassie issue did not continue. Her complaint served as a catalyst for other women to come forward and report the abuse they had experienced at the hands of the rapper. By December 6th of 2023, there were already 5 women who had reported Diddy. One of them recounted how he and his trusted entourage had sexually abused her when she was 17 years old. In response, at that time, Sean Combs, who was then artistically known as Love, wrote a post on Instagram with a photo of his daughters saying, "Enough is enough." The last few weeks, I have remained silent watching how they tried to destroy my person, my reputation, and my legacy. People in search of quick money have launched sickening accusations against me. Let me be as clear as I can be. I did not do any of the horrible things I am accused of. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. However, from there on out, everything would go downhill and the evidence against him would only grow. The allegations kept coming, now not only from women. At the beginning of 2024, Rodney Jones Jr., a music producer, said that Diddy had forced him to have sexual relations with third parties, and even tried to coerce him into having relations with other men, in addition to threatening him with death. This, along with previous complaints, led to the Federal Bureau of Investigation raiding the rapper's mansions in Miami and Los Angeles in March 2024. There they found dozens of hard drives and recording equipment that seemed to match the stories that Combs recorded the parties and sexual abuses that took place at them. In addition, at least 1,000 bottles of baby oil were found, something Cassie had referred to in her testimony. Despite these quite accusatory findings, Diddy's matter seems to have been forgotten in the media and by the general public until May 17th of 2024. Cable news network published a security video from the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles in which Combs is seen kicking on the ground and hitting his ex-partner, Cassandra Ventura. But I'm telling you that it wasn't even a threat, it wasn't a hit. He regretted it and left. Not at all. He chased her down the hallway as she tried to leave calmly. He threw her to the floor and kicked her and kept kicking her. It was a video that could not be misinterpreted. It wasn't a half conversation. It wasn't an accidental little hit that something strange happened there. And they are using it against him. Nothing to do with it. It was literally him chasing a person, throwing them to the ground and kicking them. Impossible to defend oneself, impossible to say I didn't do it or they are attacking me. It's an attack, a conspiracy. To this, Diddy in response made a video, uploaded it to Instagram, and for some reason thought that was going to be enough. In summary, she said, "It's very hard to look back at the darkest moments of your life, but sometimes you have to do it. I had hit rock bottom and was messed up, but I can't make excuses. My behavior in that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. It disgusts me. It disgusted me when I did it. It disgusts me now." I don't think he was disgusted when he did it, because if something disgusts you, you stop and leave. That is, they weren't real apologies. It was more an attempt at an excuse, an attempt to clean up his name a bit, since at no point does he mention her or explicitly say sorry. This generated a very negative reaction from people who realized that all he had done in that apology video was talk about himself. In the week following the video's release, 2 more women sued Combs. Actress and model Crystal McKinney, who accused the rapper of drugging and sexually abusing her in a recording studio, and the student who reported 4 instances of abuse between the year 1995 and 2000. In July, a 3rd woman joined the lawsuits. She is an adult film actress who claimed that the rapper had coerced and forced her into prostitution at the same parties that Cassie had referred to the previous year. Weeks before, another man had come forward to report what he had experienced with Diddy, Derek Lee Cardello Smith. Like other victims, the man said that in 1997, how he had been drugged to sexually abuse him. Because that's how it is, he had no preferences for women or men. He started reporting this a long time ago, 50 Cent, but we're going to talk about that later. Notably, Derek had already created this report back in 1997, but due to threats and fear of retaliation, he decided it was best to withdraw it. So, the fact that Cassie stepped forward and made her report started this whole chain reaction until finally the victims started to come out. All these accusations led to a first trial against Sean Combs on September 10th, 2024. Diddy did not show up to the event, by the way. In this first trial, he was sentenced to pay $100 million in compensation the day after the sentence. One of the singers, who belonged to his record label and even collaborated on Diddy's own music, reported him for workplace harassment, insults, and for touching him without his consent. 5 days later, on September 16th, federal agents arrested the rapper at a Manhattan hotel in relation to the parties he was organizing. During the day, Diddy spent his time wandering around the city, visiting friends and family, even enjoying the greenery around him. They saw him enjoying himself photographing with fans. This is probably because he knew he would be arrested, that it was imminent, and that he wouldn't be getting out of prison for a long time. Diddy produced 2 types of parties. One was the one that came to light, the one that could be seen by the public. Magazines would come out, and the other was the one that people who wouldn't talk about the subject would go to. People that Diddy trusted more. The parties, extravagant but all in all normal, were the white parties, where all the guests had to wear white and only white. These events also raised funds for charity. The most hidden and exclusive parties were the freak-off parties, which are the problematic ones. Obviously, Diddy's parties were held and were relevant because of the status. The motto was, essentially, if you're someone important, you're invited to Diddy's party. He wasn't even relevant enough to be there, if we're being honest, because his record label wasn't doing great. The consequence of killing or sending your biggest artists to prison? And he wasn't making good music on his own either. He was more of an image than a real artist. The white parties were a place to connect with other celebrities and be amazed at what Puff Daddy was presenting. Everything that could be considered a rarity was there. Everything that was exaggerated or dramatic was part of these parties. There was music, food, incredible shows, art, nudity, and even an authorized copy of the Declaration of Independence, which she carried as a treasure in 2004 to show everyone what she was capable of buying. These were the good parties, which generally did not have a sinister purpose. That did not exempt the white parties from abuses, especially towards the women hired by coms. The abuse of the workers was constant and presented in different forms, whether it was sexual behavior or a terrible salary with impossible hours to meet. The later it got, the worse things became. Right after the white parties, the B-side would start.
The people
Would leave little by little, and only those most eager to see what Sean Combs had to offer would remain. Diddy's famous freak-off parties mostly took place in New York, Los Angeles, and Miami, almost always in well-known hotels in those cities or even in the singer's private residences. We still don't have a complete or official list, but it is believed that the most famous people in Hollywood or very relevant people in the industry would attend these parties for days, in which women were drugged to keep them in an obedient and submissive attitude so that they would agree to have sexual relations. In addition to that, they were full of drugs everywhere. In fact, it was said that Diddy ordered people around at his house or wherever he was celebrating. Basically, all the people who provided services at the place also transported drugs they had on them for the guests. According to the case prosecutor, the party organizer watched all the sexual acts that occurred there, and he recorded or documented them with photos, without anyone having given their consent for him to do so, nor for him to keep them. With this audiovisual material, the rapper blackmailed the women and also the men who had been victims of the abuses of several people. During this process, to get them to pay attention to him, he had very murky methods. He tracked the location of these people and let them know he was following them by showing black cars with his security inside. He monitored their social networks and demonstrated his media power to scare them in such a way that they did not go to the authorities. Anonymous sources described the freak-off parties, saying it was more than just a wild party, it was an environment of total control. Since mid-September of last year, the prosecution in charge of the case has asked that all possible victims come forward to participate in the complaint. The response was surprising in the first days of October 2024. Tony Busby, the Texas lawyer representing the victims, let it be known in a press conference that the class action lawsuit has more than 120 victims who claim to have been victims of abuse and sexual assault. His law firm is working with Ava Law Group, another firm specialized in large-scale sexual abuse cases, like the one they led against the Boy Scouts of America organization. Among the 120 plaintiffs we are talking about some time ago, this number has probably been updated. There are men and women, of whom 25 were minors when the abuses occurred. The youngest victim reported being only 9 years old when the events occurred. They had all been drawn to Sean Combs, seeking a career in music. The prosecution let it be known that Diddy is not the only one responsible, but that there was talk of a criminal network in which a lot of people would be involved. Although to this day, the names of those involved have not been made public. As of today, Sean Combs is the only accused facing 120 charges of abuse, and it is expected that the minimum sentence he will be given is 15 years. Since September 2024, he has been in preventive detention under suicide watch, as authorities believe he might try to end his life, to avoid facing the consequences of what is one of the most shocking cases of abuse in the United States. In the scene, songs were always used to tell stories, convey messages, or mention experiences. Sometimes the lyrics are very explicit in what they are telling, like in Tupac's latest songs, where he is literally threatening Diddy and blaming him for the attempted murder. And then there are some hidden messages, a reference that not everyone would understand. The issue with Diddy is not recent. As I told you, there are many artists who did not fall into working with him, who did not approach him because he gave them a bad impression. People who did not want to associate with him because they had experiences from friends or acquaintances that showed he was not a good person. And there are many, but many references in music. We are going to talk anyway about a very recent one. And it's the last reference that Eminem made, which is not the first, not the only one, but it's the last one he made, which is one of my favorite lines in all the rap diss tracks I've ever heard. Let's remember that Eminem signed with Dr. Dre's record label in the 90s, after he separated from Death Row Records. Because of all the violence and the methods that Suge Knight had, being Eminem, a friend of Dr. Dre who has been involved in all this for years, he knows a lot. Despite not having experienced it closely, since in those years he was not yet famous, nor was he moving in those circles. In fact, Chuck Knight accused several people, including Dr. Dre, of knowing everything that Diddy was doing but not doing anything about it. In 2024, Eminem surprised us with a new album, which includes the song Fuel, which surprised many just by listening to it. However, after Sean Combs' legal disaster, it began to resonate more prominently. I am going to display a specific part of the topic on the screen here. With the translation, I recommend pausing it, but in essence, the wordplay is excellent. The paragraph accuses P. Diddy of being a violator in a very smart and funny way, and then it continues. He asks for Biggie and Tupac to rest in peace, but also says he doesn't want to fight with Diddy because he could be next, referring to Kiffy D, who is accused of killing Tupac. Or at least that's what is understood back. This is not the first or the only time Eminem has referenced P. Diddy, but this one was spectacular. Many more have given their opinions in songs like Residente from Calle 13, who said he met P. Diddy and turned down an offer from him, but he didn't clarify much more about his person. And while there are many who do not associate with Sean Combs, there is one rapper who hates him, who has been saying all sorts of things for years, and that is 50 Cent. In 2006, he released the track The Bomb, where he accuses Diddy of knowing who killed Diggy. He's had him in his sights for years, accusing him of harassing other rappers for a long time. And, for example, he made jokes about Sean Combs' friend Jay-Z not saying anything about the matter. Because ever since all this that's happening came out, Jay-Z, who was seen with him all the time, who is known to be friends, remained silent. 50 Cent is actually working on his own documentary as he claims that Sean Combs did everything he is accused of. He's always known about it but never participated or went to the parties as he fully understood what occurred there. But the list of people who can't stand Diddy gets longer with J. Cole, another rapper with whom he fought at some points in his career. The fight seems to have escalated enough that there were threats, which is nothing new for Sean Combs. What's curious is that the internet took a song by the artist J. Cole and began to associate it with the Diddy case and the deaths of other artists. But first, for this we have to talk about Beyonce. Singer Beyonce is married to another artist, Jay-Z, both are friends with P. Diddy. I'm not going to dwell on conspiracy theories, but they are definitely a couple with many theories behind them. They are the first ones always blamed for Illuminatis. To start, Jay-Z had been in the industry for several years when he met Beyonce. He was 31 and she was 19, so their careers were quite different and their experiences as well. Jay-Z worked with Biggie, showing how long he's been around. He knew Biggie personally. You can imagine that he also had a relationship with P. Diddy, so it's normal that his partner would also be connected to him. Now, over the years, Beyonce and Jay-Z have become a powerful couple with a lot of money and connections, and I mean a lot of money. I mean that Jay-Z is one of the most successful rappers in the world and a figure who carries a lot of weight. Not only for the number of #1 albums he has made, but also for the number of businesses he has been involved in, which have left him with profits of billions of dollars. They are those who know quite a bit about Sean Combs. They are, as far as I understand, people close to him. If they have questionable practices, they're less noticeable than those of Sean Combs or Suge Knight. But it was led to believe that Beyonce became famous by outperforming her rivals, referring to singers like Aaliyah or LaFay, who are women who died several years ago. This connection was made after the public rediscovered the song She Knows by J. Cole, in which there is a verse where he mentions them.
You gotta piece the alley up, that's... Piece that left fire, Michael Jackson. I see her just as soon as I die, she knows. She knows.
A star's only flaw is that it burns. Rest in peace, Aaliyah. Rest in peace. LEFI Michael Jackson. I'll see you right when I die. This paragraph, this sentence here, doesn't really have much to do with the rest of the song. The rest of the time, J. Cole sings the phrase, she knows, over and over again. He repeats it a lot. Besides, many have related this to Beyoncé because of the similarity in pronunciation between her name and Jay-Z's. You see, the singer's real last name is Knowles. In fact, at one point she was known as Beyoncé Knowles. Her almost full name was used. Beyoncé Knowles and She Knows sound very similar. And perhaps a bit more far-fetched is the fact that Jay-Z's real name is Sean. Then, there are other people who also focused on looking for numbers used by them in songs or their birthdays. But there we would be talking about something a bit more fanciful. The important thing is that the tone of the song and the lyrics make it seem like there is more behind the deaths of LEFI, Aaliyah, and Michael Jackson. Maybe it wasn't J. Cole's intention, or maybe it was another indirect in rap songs. But we're not finished. There's another person who got involved in the matter. It could be that Kanye West is a bit insane. That's exactly what for many turned out to benefit other artists. He often speaks incoherently, so when he makes somewhat conspiratorial comments about other rappers, people tend to ignore him. He has mentioned numerous things throughout his career. He also talked about Jay-Z, about an elite, about how this elite intends to keep him controlled because Kanye has to be medicated. Let's see if we're going to be fair with some of the videos where he talks about these things. You can see on his face that he's not okay at those moments. But there was one in particular where he seemed quite well, despite being rude. During the time when he got on stage while Taylor Swift was speaking after receiving an award at the VMAs. This moment laid the groundwork for the fight that would later occur between Taylor, Kanye, and Kim Kardashian, which we're not going to talk about now.
Taylor, I'm thrilled for you, but I have to say Beyoncé made one of the greatest videos ever.
As you could see, Kanye gets on stage while Taylor is giving thanks. He went up to say that everything's fine, but that Beyoncé had a great video clip that year, the best of all time. And what happens? People started to pay attention to different awards and many artists thanked Beyoncé when they won something. Let's see, she is a great artist, acclaimed and all. But some of these awards, some of these speeches make you wonder, is it okay? What's the point of mentioning her here at this moment? One might say, is she the only artist who inspired these people? Maybe they do it out of solidarity or because they think she deserves the award, but for one reason or another they don't want to give it to her. It could be like Macbeth, if you don't thank her, something bad happens to you. Kanye West's behavior towards Taylor Swift is now viewed differently. Thinking that maybe he knew he had to mention Beyoncé or something bad was going to happen to him. And there, nobody told Taylor the consequences. Or could it be that he's not and he's just rude? It's worth mentioning before moving on to another topic that Kanye West was married for a long time to Kim Kardashian, a person who was heavily involved with Diddy. She attended parties and celebrity events where they met and got along well. Diddy invited the Kardashian-Jenner family when they were still minors. Speaking of minors, Usher and Justin Bieber are two good examples of Diddy doing things that perhaps were inappropriate, that everyone could see. At 14 years old, rapper Usher signed with a record label and ended up in Diddy's hands to take care of him. Let's remember that Sean Combs was a person who grew up surrounded by drugs. He continued in a promising career, but it made him surround himself with people and parties. He resided in New York and had complete control over every aspect of Usher's life. For the greater good of building him as an artist, did it yield good results? Yes, of course, Usher is successful, but it's also clear that he witnessed things at a young age that he shouldn't have. In the case of Justin Bieber, many accused Diddy of being the reason for the problems he had during his adolescence. Justin grew up in front of the cameras, a fame as sudden and strong as his can wreak havoc. But it's not just that, but when he was little, just starting out, he became friends with Diddy. They were the protagonists of awkward moments on camera. We don't know how far this relationship went, we don't know what Diddy showed Justin. But it's clear that she had several mental health issues over the years that could have been caused or exacerbated by the producer. Aside from the questionable relationships he had with minors and the abuse of his previous partners, there is another issue that continues to be uncomfortable, but that borders on conspiracy theories. The problem is that Vivi's story is so strange and out of the ordinary that the theory about Kim Porter's death could be true. Kim was Sean Combs' girlfriend, they had 3 children, she was famous, and they seemed to have a very good relationship. During her lifetime, she appeared content and free from major controversies, as portrayed by the media. Kim Porter died on November 15, 2018 in California. The cause of her death was pneumonia. Pneumonia is not something to take lightly, it can worsen and if not treated can cause death. But Kim had all possible forms of treatment at her disposal and in general was a healthy person. How does a person with so many resources die of pneumonia? Well, that's the question many people ask themselves. Various rumors about it persist. And now that all this has come out, one wonders if perhaps Kim could have suffered from abuse, which we will not know because apparently she left no evidence. Sean Combs has not left jail, and at the moment, different documentaries are being awaited about his story. And how did he become what we see now? The complaints keep coming. This is not a misunderstanding or a staging. Really, Diddy abused many people over the course of his career. What I've told you so far is just a small part of what he did to become a millionaire and control others. You may wonder what people in Diddy's life say. What do they say? His mother has been defending him tooth and nail. Despite the numerous accusations, she doesn't believe them and accuses the public of believing in a conspiracy against her son. On the other hand, Sean Combs' children had to come out and say that there is false information going around about the relationship between him and Kim Porter. Some time ago, a book was published that claims to tell the story of abuses allegedly suffered by Kim, but it was dismissed as nothing more than a scam and false testimony. The crimes of P. Diddy are so many and involve so many people that we could be here. 10 hours. The worst part is that I'm not exaggerating. We could be here 10 hours listing the complaints that were made. All the artists who ever went to New York have a story with him. There are references from years and years in songs about his behavior, and I could really explain a lot more. This video was a bit short more than anything because he is actually involved in many things. So much so that if you put any word in Google next to the word Diddy, a lot of results will appear. Try it, he did everything and messed with everyone. He has a lot of rumors around him, things that could be true but have not yet been proven. So in reality, this video for me is not finished because I wanted to continue. The only problem is that I don't know with what. Because I could continue with the artist references. I could continue with the stories that other artists have with him. I could go on about the rumors and the Beyonce and Jay-Z situation. I could continue with the new complaints because they continue with the place where he is staying. So it occurred to me that maybe if you guys want something in particular, leave it in the comments. And I will then put together a long video with those topics. Or things that you might think should be mentioned about what happened with P. Diddy, things that delve deeper into what we discussed today. But well, this video ends here because again, I don't see which of all the things to put. Leave your opinions and recommendations in the comments below. Here are the Patreons and channel members. Thank you for supporting me through those means. And with nothing more to say, check out this new recommended compilation video. Subscribe by clicking on my face. See you in the next video. Goodbye.